I'm talking actually about the psychological impact of pandemics in terms of how we address it and as we move forward. And I think this is so important. I'm so glad that you all have brought this into the mix, because many times when we're looking at recovery, we look at the disaster management and all other things, and we don't really look at the psychological impact. And this really has a lot to do with how we move forward with our human resources. So I think this is a very important aspect. I hope that we will have a lot of persons here listening, because as leaders, we need to understand the importance of understanding the psyche of our employees and how will they affected, because it would definitely affect the organization in terms of moving forward. So I need to say that this is really important, and I'm glad that this was included in the whole forum in terms of discussions. So let me start by saying, throughout the years, psychological impact of pandemics has not been sufficiently addressed, and that's definite. More attention has been spent, as I said before, on the disaster management plans. However, early recognition and treatment of psychological impact can immensely improve the productivity of any organization. So COVID-19 has brought a number of anxieties among workers, most recent being whether their decision about being vaccinated will impact their job security. And that is, as we were speaking about that just now, I'm saying that is so important, because that's one of the major anxieties people are experiencing now. Some who don't want to take the vaccine, one thing, would that really affect my job security? Persons are saying that if you're not vaccinated, you may not be able to go out to work. And there are a lot of rumors, and people are really trying to figure out what is really happening, and they're anxious about that. This, among other issues, places a great amount of anxiety and stress among employees. Along with the social and economic losses, individuals experience mental instability, which might precipitate post-traumatic stress disorder. And the most common mental disorders, such as depression and anxiety, are expected to increase as a result of negative impact of this pandemic. So we understand that because of the pandemic, we will be facing employees who will be actually stressed out, because then that stress might go into post-traumatic stress. Yes, so that's one of the things we need to understand. And the most common mental disorder, such as depression and anxiety, expected to increase. Women, dependent, elderly, and children become the most vulnerable in this set. So as employers, what do we look for post-traumatic? What do we expect to see in our organization? The psychological consequences of any pandemic are difficult to predict, as it depends on multiple individual and collective factors. And these factors include a person's vulnerability, and that is the past experience, any kind of trauma or disaster, how they dealt with it, their level of exposure, what impact it had on them, right? These are things they look for. And also their level of resilience, and that is the ability to bounce back after trauma. So in terms of how people react, it will be based on those factors, and two of them would be resilience and their vulnerability. How does this manifest itself in the workplace? So we have a feeling of helplessness, and this may fuel into feeling victimized. So you find staff may say, listen, somebody's victimized, and either another worker or maybe a manager is victimizing me. There's a lack of self-trust. The person will feel that they're able to do the work again. Desire for sympathy regarding work issues, so they may come saying a number of things to get sympathy from their employers. There's also sleep disorder, and you would recognize that it will manifest itself in the workplace, because you may find persons sleeping on a job. And that's because they're having sleep disorder, they're not sleeping at night, and they fall into sleep on the job. There's frustration and irritability also, and we would recognize that while you're working, you find persons are picking on each other in the workplace, and there's a lot of conflict in the workplace, very conflictual environment, and then we recognize that something is happening. These are some of the signs that, okay, we need to pay attention. Another thing is absenteeism and lateness. We find that persons experiencing different trauma and stress tend to stay away from work or come to work late. When we recognize these signs, we don't just take it lightly. We have to pay attention and seek some sort of help for the persons. Because these symptoms usually progress into anxiety, depressive disorders, some of them for addiction, suicidal ideation. So therefore, we must treat it immediately and understand that it is very important. So we're reaching now, we have already identified what are some of these signs. And if you're in your workplace, you would see those signs. But if you're working at home, then you would have to look at other things. And there's where we will communicate, and I'll talk about that later. But what do we do different to help, and how do we respond? Because we must respond when we see these things are happening. There'll be a lot of uncertainty as we attempt to go back to normal. The truth is we will never be the same, no matter what we try. Things will change, and we have to learn to adapt to that change. So as employers, we need to be able to understand and respond to those emotional and psychological state of employees. And I want to leave 3 words with you in terms of how do we respond. Vulnerability, connectivity, and flexibility. And I'll quickly explain the 3. These 3 terms will assist you in moving forward. Vulnerability. We must be vulnerable, meaning we must be open to staff about their anxieties. This opens the door to help them talk about their feelings. For instance, if you was a boss and a manager of the organization going through some sort of trauma, some kind of stress because of the whole pandemic, it's okay to share, open up and be vulnerable and share it with your staff member, because that person probably just need one person to share something with them, for them to recognize they're not alone. And it gives them the opportunity to open up and talk to you about their feelings. And that talking is therapy, and that helps them in terms of, okay, I'm not alone in this thing. There are other persons facing this. Let me don't give up. Let me, work on it. And it gives them that kind of relief that somebody else is going through that experience. The second one, connectivity. We need to build a culture of connection. And that's so important for organizations to build connection with their staff, bosses and staff members, connect, especially around this time. Check in with your staff. Remember that not everybody is working on organization, in the organization. Some are working at distance from home. You need to call them, check in, call, find out how they're doing. And we're not just checking for in terms of work-wise, how they're doing with the work. That is important, but we also need to find out emotionally, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How you're coping with the children? Why you cannot do anything about it? What you're doing, asking that person for them to recognize, okay, there's this connection, my boss really care. And it gives them more leeway in terms of, okay, I have a caring boss, so let me put more energy into what I'm doing to ensure that my office, or the functions of the workplace is done well. We need to regularly check in. That's very important. It helps the person feel connected to the organization. We're checking in also to tell persons, okay, this is some of the things, these are some of the things we are doing. Many times, and different persons have different leadership styles. So some person might say, well, listen, a leader might say, I would include my staff in meetings. This is my preferred way, but everybody don't think that way. So if we're having a meeting, I would include the staff in terms of decision making. What are their thoughts, and get ideas from others. But for some other employers, they might say, listen, I was just going to tell them what we have done. So I'm saying when we're connecting with our staff, it's not about just saying we have done this, but we can say we are going to do this. It makes them feel part of. So yes, you made your decision, but you don't wait until it's done and you've already done it to tell them. In checking in, you say, listen, we are about to do so and so. And so on. These things help the person to feel connected to the organization, and you really need at this point in time to build that culture of connection. The third one is being flexible. You may have to make some adjustments, and this COVID has caused us to be very flexible. Don't be afraid to adopt the hybrid workplace model where you work from home. As a matter of fact, many of my clients will come and say, listen, I am overworked working from home. People produce more. Right now, people are talking about the amount of hours they spend at home working. many more hours than if they're in the office. So you can get a lot from them, but what you need to do is to really embrace that change and embrace the whole idea of the flexibility with working space, working hours. You would get much from it. So don't be afraid to be flexible. Don't be afraid to connect. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. And lastly, I want to say crisis breeds opportunity, but it also drives transformational change. So let's embrace it and let's not be afraid to change and embrace that change so that you can have a more robust recovery. And thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation. I may have stayed a longer time than I don't know if I did, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Carmel, and thank you, CCGI, for inviting me to share my views on how companies can succeed in the new environment. This new environment, for me, features an increase in remote working, where employees are self-managing and companies are taking advantage of the intangible assets that they create. If you were at the opening ceremony on Sunday, you would have seen that Professor Mervyn King, he highlighted the significance of intangibles in this new economy that we're working in. He explained that about 90% of valuations were derived from these non-physicals. And I'd add that it's not just those listed businesses that have successfully and skillfully leveraged intangibles. You have to look at businesses of any size in any country. They can improve financial performance significantly, especially when their executives lead by principles. And I will say principles instead of values, because I don't want to mix the financial part of my discussion here. The objective for me as a financial professional is to present from a commercial perspective, because I want to show executives how they can contribute additional value to their businesses by resetting their governing principles. Principles set by a business form a part of that intangible assets Mervyn King mentioned. They create the goodwill, the brand reputation, and even social change. It creates so much for the business. While there are several ways that businesses can succeed in today's environment, my recommendation today, I'm just going to give you one, and it's a practical, something that you can do and communicate to your employees immediately. Yet it should provide the biggest impact for your business, given the economic circumstances in your country and because of COVID and the recovery. So my recommendation is this: succeeding in the new environment, have employees actively monitor how they create value for the business. Let them do that on their own. You don't have to monitor it for them. Don't have the videos, etc. It's not needed, it's not necessary. This simple change is transformative, especially for building on your intangibles. You can introduce this self-monitoring system by using consistent, simple language. Because if you think about it, whether a worker is an executive, whether they're an intern or they're even an external freelancer, anyone who's working for your organization is creating value for it. They create value in 4 main ways: through new value, maintained value, created value, and restored value. I'll explain what those are. So new value is all about innovation, whether it's a new product, a new service, whether they develop a new market, or they get involved in a new distribution model. Any new idea is new value. Stephen Johnson explains this innovation in his book, Where Good Ideas Come From, and he describes innovation as a room. It magically expands each time there's a new open door. So every time you go into that room, there's a door, and that door will lead to another room, and then another door, and then another room. When your employees get involved in producing new value for your organization, they are laying the foundation for the business continued success. When the second type of value, category of value, is maintained value. This is where you create business as usual work. So they're performing the daily tasks. These are the set processes and systems that generate current revenue. Businesses only focused, however, on maintaining value often miss the opportunities to grow. And I know Joanne just mentioned crisis opportunities always. So without maintained value, you don't have a viable business. Without doing other segments of categories of value, you don't have the sustainability that you need. The third type of value, is upgraded value. Like the name indicates, an upgrade is a revision of or improvement to maintained value. As executives, I'm sure that you know that your business is a learning organism. You need to improve, even though things work, you need to improve because the environment changes. So the time that your workforce contributes to upgraded value helps you retain your client list or your customer base. And the fourth category of value is the recovery. Restored value is all about recovering something that has been broken, whether it's technology, a system, a process, or even reputation. The work performed by employees is meant to restore the business to its prior position. But you can imagine as well, if you spend time restoring all the time, you're taking funds, you're taking resources away from building and growing. So you want to reduce, where possible, the restored value within your business. Value creation works in unison across these four categories. You ignore one and the business will be at risk. There's an example that I like to highlight, and it's about an American company called Quirky. I don't know if you know of it, but it was founded in 2009 as an inventors platform. They were allowing inventors to come to their website and pitch their ideas, have their products developed, so light switches, all sorts of things, and they had them sold in places like Walmart. So they had the entry to the big retailers, which is why the website was so popular. Quirky's infrastructure for innovation was admirable. It really was. They raised 170 million US in funding, but within 6 years, that business had gone under. Their focus had been so heavily on new value that without strengthening the maintained value or improving their business model with upgraded value or restoring trust of buyers when they lost it, the operating model collapsed. So it's 4 categories of value, and managing it is what you have to do. You have to balance that. Don't look at the financial statements. You're talking about intangibles. Look at how your employees are contributing to these different types of values. Communicating these 4 types is very important because it aligns each employee's contribution to your overall vision and strategy, regardless to the department that they belong. Because as you know, in a department, you might probably have different KPIs, and then it's difficult to then align and have everything congruent to your strategy. So if everyone is monitoring in the same way, it makes it easier to see if you're achieving some of the key milestones and the impact that this strategy is meant to deliver. So with this simple shift, employees self-manage, which is what we're seeing today anyway. They have to self-manage if they're involved in remote working. So they can contribute change in the business at their own pace, which I think, Joanne, is something that you'd like to see, because each person, how they react to the crisis and situation, the circumstances that they're in, is unique. And you can't expect that the mental capacity of one person will mirror the other. Each employee is an individual after all. So to succeed in the current environment, encourage your employees to start where they are. Ask them to aim for contributing about 35% combined with new and upgraded value. They can do that by getting involved in subjective thinking, problem solving, advocating for your business, because social media is all the craze, as you know, inventing new forms, inventing something new for your business, and building new and stronger connections with your stakeholders. They are your employees. They are there to be trusted to do these things for you. They should be doing these things for you. So businesses with employees that do this, we have seen that they outperform their competitors time and time again, because the competitors are based on a bottom-heavy structure. A lot of people are doing maintained work, so they're following directions as opposed to thinking on their own and contributing in that way. This may seem like a little change, but it's one of the most powerful ones you can make in your organization, because once this change is made, management will have the insight they need to see how each employee delivers unique value to the business. That's because the intangibles economy, in the intangible economy, people truly are your greatest assets. They are, because they are the thinkers. They contribute beyond their technical training. So even if you have a lawyer, a corporate secretary, a governance person, they are your ambassadors for your brand. They are doing a lot more than what they were technically trained to do. Managers with this knowledge can then begin to change traditional recruitment practices, because applications and interviews are not necessary for all types of jobs. One of the examples I like to bring when I talk about this is TEDx. Everyone knows of TEDx. Do you know, though, that they only have 500 employees, but a workforce of over 20,000? That's incredible. So, and many of them did not go through an application and interview process. So you can ask me more about this when we have a discussion. So our research has shown that once more businesses evolve how they work and have this open access recruitment in place for some of the jobs, unemployment numbers will fall. You can use intangibles to help solve unemployment. And that is a big social change that the brand will obviously benefit from over the long term. In closing, I want to add that whenever you think of change and you think that it is slow, think of this. Sometime in the 1980s, there was someone in the world holding on to a rotary dial phone. Do you remember those phones where you had to do the numbers and it goes back? To call someone, you had to wait for the rotary dial to return before you can select the next number. Then you wait again, then you select, then you wait. And if you chose the wrong number, or you put your finger slipped or something like that, you had to hang up and call again, begin all over again. Making a call was tedious. There was no touch dial. There was no display screen. You couldn't see or delete incorrect digits if you dialed it. You couldn't store the number. Many people simply accepted that was how you use a phone. Today, as executives, we have a choice in how we organize our talent. We can use the techniques we hold dear from the manufacturing era when time and managing costs were important, or we can change to something else. To succeed in today's economy, consider intangibles when you organize your workforce. People can work from anywhere and can complete their work and still earn from that delivered work, something that they did 2 months ago, in the future. Today's economy is so different. And like using the rotary dial phone, if you cling to the old, you miss out on the opportunities of the new. Thank you.
And thank you to Rhonda. I particularly like how you advanced Joanne's presentation in terms of really bringing in the employee element and helping us understand, as Joanne was talking about, you know, the impact of vaccination requirements, the uncertainty of employment, and this, I think, dovetails with your fourth value about restored value. If the employers have to spend so much time trying to get the employees to be secure in their roles in order to build further value for the company, then this is a vicious cycle. So I thought that was a good tie-in. So now I would like to introduce Lara Quentrall Thomas. And Lara has more than 30 years of experience in recruitment and HR management, including 25 as an entrepreneur and company owner with professional experience in both the UK and Trinidad and Tobago. In addition to negotiating contracts, business development, and strategic planning for the firm, she has overall responsibility for more than 100 contract personnel employed with clients such as IBM, GE Oil and Gas, Cable and Wireless, Electrolux, Coca-Cola, etc. And again, you can read more of Lara's bio as well as Rhonda's bio in the agenda. So Lara, over to you to further advance this discussion.
Thank you very much, Carmel, and my thanks for the invitation to share some thoughts with you all this evening. It's wonderful to be here, and obviously I'm on a very good mood because England won the football today. So I know we're not here to talk about football, but it's important to fill the room with optimism and positivity. So we're talking about the issues related to adjusting to working from home, as well as and the people issues that come out of that. And you know, as an HR professional, and as I trained in HR prior to COVID, we have always really been drilled with using technology and how to use technology to do things like optimize labor costs, reinforce compliance. We use standardized measuring and really infusing technology through everything we do. And certainly COVID has really pushed so many firms to adopt new technology, to innovate their technological solutions. We've seen that across sectors. But what has happened in that massive clashing of office and home, and that infusion of technology in all of the different workplaces that the companies that we run, is that we have moved away from people at a time when people needed us most. And you know, as an HR professional, there are many areas of our work that we traditionally think as very people-centric. So things like recruitment, learning, training and development. But even those, we've traditionally looked at how they connect to productivity. How do we measure productivity? Of course, when you have a workforce that you're not physically seeing anymore, or as much as you did, it becomes an entirely new conversation around productivity. And I noticed that Dr. Spence talked about the fact that everybody's working much longer hours, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are much more productive or much more engaged or much more committed. It's just that they're working a lot longer, a lot harder, but not necessarily with a lot more purpose or enjoyment of their work. So a number of studies have been done during the pandemic by McKinsey and other global thought leaders on what the new workplace is going to look like now that technology is in everything that we do. And they've come up with this idea of going back to human, which I really like as an HR professional as well as a business owner. And this is where the concerns that HR needs to address are those mental health issues, which were addressed earlier, safety and physical safety needs of employees that we weren't necessarily addressing before. Because in all of the technological changes, I think many firms have lost some of the core elements of how they treat their people, and remembering that at the heart of every business, with all of the computers and reports and spreadsheets, there are people involved. So what we have to think about is how we create agile HR models for our firms, rather than traditional models where we're trying to fit everybody into one performance metric or one compliance standard. And this is going to be very important when we move into the hybrid, or we continue with the hybrid workplace, which I think after COVID is going to be a reality for many, many countries, many sectors. So there's not that many firms that I've read about that are going back full, everybody in the office full time. Most of us are either continuing remotely fully or looking at hybrid. I think the majority, 80% of firms are looking at the hybrid model. So we have to adapt to suit this new model. We have to shift away from skill management and talent management as the terms that we've used, to really addressing the employee experience in a far more targeted way and a more dynamic, flexible way, which again was referenced earlier. So this means not just thinking about things like employee safety, but also taking a much broader view of issues like diversity, equity, inclusion, and really understanding the sense of purpose that the organization has and that the people who work for the organization or with the organization have. So there's a lot of studies that have been done that connect employee satisfaction, sense of purpose, productivity, with their relationship with their managers. And yet, at the same time, a significant majority of people say that the most stressful aspect of their job is their relationship with their manager, 75–80% of people. So one of the things that we have to do now as HR leaders, as business owners, is really educate our managers, our line managers, on their role, their pivotal role now, to create quality workplace relationships and not just deliverables and performance reports. So there are a number of what have been referred to as management levers or levers, depending on which part of the world you're listening, that can help organizations navigate this new back to human workplace model. So the first, as I mentioned, is inclusion. We have to encourage people when they do come back to the office to bring their whole person back, to create programs that really do explore and focus on not just inclusion, but purpose. And this is not the purpose of the firm necessarily, but the purpose of the person. Each individual human being that works for us has a different purpose. For some people, it's feed their kids, pay their mortgage. For others, it's educate children, change the world, save the environment, save the planet. Everybody has a different purpose. So when employees experience that sense of personalized, inclusive attention from their managers, rather than being force-fed into a fixed model, we find that they are almost immediately more included, more committed, more engaged, more connected to the work and the company by extension. So the first lever is that creating that inclusion with individual focused manager to employee, manager to employee to manager relationship. The second speaks to purpose. And, you know, a number of studies have shown that a company can have a purpose. It's often clearly stated, but it very often does not connect to that individual purpose, as I said. So inclusion is one thing we have to work on. And the second is purpose. People are 5 times more likely to be excited to work for a company if they feel that the company purpose aligns with their own and has a positive impact on the world. So as we come through COVID and we come out of COVID, we as organizational leaders have to rethink our purpose as organizations, and then how that impacts our workforce and our staff. The third lever is faster, better decision making. We have to find ways now to empower our staff, particularly because so many of them are going to be working at home, either full-time or part-time. And one of the ways that's been suggested to do this is to create, rather than the traditional hierarchy that many of us know, to create and focus on networks of teams that allows collaboration, faster decision making. It's very important that people don't feel isolated when they work at home, because that has been a complaint for many people. It's a year and change now that we've been working at home. Many people feel very isolated, even with all of the check-ins and Zoom meetings and WhatsApps. It doesn't really get to the core value or the core need for human beings to socialize and to sit together in a room and brainstorm and to come up with ideas and find solutions to problems. So we have to really build that back into our organizations that we may have lost over the last year. The fourth lever is finding the right people, particularly in leadership. We need leaders now who have the right temperament and character to carry our organizations through the rest of the pandemic and beyond. These are leaders that demonstrate empathy, emotional intelligence, that really can be flexible. And I think this is one of the things that we have seen, it certainly in Trinidad, in a lot of our larger organizations, our public service, the inability to be flexible, to adapt quickly to what has happened, has caused massive fallout, both in terms of productivity as well as job losses and so on that we're seeing. So we need either to recruit or to train our leaders to demonstrate curiosity, flexibility, that empathy that people need to understand that I'm going to get lots of different perspectives before I make a decision, so that everybody feels included, not that top-down model that we've all grown up with. The next lever is what's called activist investor partnerships. And this is really where firms link talent to value. And this is where we really have to focus now, more than we did before the pandemic, on skills building and understanding our value agenda as firms and how our staff contribute to that. So this really speaks certainly to what Rhonda was talking about, the different ways that employees can add value, build new value, come up with new ideas and so on. But it's really about looking at the talent we have, identifying opportunities for upskilling, identifying opportunities for reskilling, to connect that talent to the value agenda of the firm. So where does the firm see itself in the next 6 months, 12 months, 24 months? What skills are needed, and how do we bring our staff with us on that journey? It's very hard to vision your way out of a pandemic. I have to say, been trying to do it myself. It's very hard to even imagine what the company is going to look like in 6 months, far less 5 years, 6 years. But you can take it in small bites and identify the skills. And then the final lever is team learning. And this is really where people who are involved with their peers in learning experiences or provided with coaching, whether it's personal coaches, business coaches, career coaches, are far more likely to have a successful transformation either from hybrid to full-time from the full-time in office to the hybrid situation, or full remote learning, full remote work, People like to learn together. So in all of this COVID experience, there's been so much isolation, there's been so much disconnection, that one of the things we have to focus on is reconnecting people with each other, with our leaders, with our firm's value and its mission and so on. So that this is where HR has the opportunity, as we count down to the end of the pandemic and we look beyond it, to come up with strategies that really do bring the human back to the workplace. Not physically necessarily, but emotionally and in terms of their skills. So some of the things that companies need to think about is what that hybrid model is going to look like in terms of talent. It's not just this, to say, okay, you know, if your surname starts with a T, you'll be in on a Monday and a Wednesday, or, you know, it goes deeper than that. What talent do we need, where and when and why? There are some parts of our organization that don't need to return to the office at all. There are other parts that have to be in the office 100% of the time. There are many jobs, pilots, barbers, that cannot be hybrid, that cannot be remote. So, you know, you really have to, as an HR professional, as a business leader, have a proper understanding of your organization and not necessarily apply one model to all staff is really the message. The one model fits all, one size fits all approach to HR cannot work anymore. It hasn't worked really, if we're honest, for a long time. So we need to look at our processes. We need to look at how we measure performance, productivity. And I think the key message I would leave you with is to really endeavor to customize our solutions for our staff, the same way we do for our customers. You know, many firms now will offer you the ability as a consumer to customize everything from your laptop to your car. You go online and you build the model that you want and they ship it to you. And yet for our people, we have a one size fits all, metrics, performance measurement, standards, etc. There are some things that can't be customized, you know, compliance with law and so on, but there are lots of opportunities for us to personalize the workplace experience for our staff. And I think that is something that we need to give serious thought to, explore what's possible, what can be done. And so the actions that we take now, today, as we begin to get ready to come out from under our blankets, is to invest in our people. And this then creates job growth, job excitement, engagement, which means that our firms are stronger, which means that we deliver better service. And of course, then that is a cycle of growth, consumer advocacy, and so on. So that's really what I want to start the conversation with. I hope it was useful, and I look forward to the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you to Lara for, as I actually said, advancing this conversation further. And once again, looking at really centering the employee at the heart of these discussions and how we are adapting to our new environment. I'd like to go back to Joanne, and one of the areas that you were looking at specifically with mental health. In your experience and with your clients, could you advise us on how open or willing are employers to factor in looking at, you know, occupational health and safety and those sort of considerations, mental health, really solutions, adaptations, etc., into those practices within the workforce?
So from, I am an EAP provider also for a number of organizations. And what the employer really provide is an EAP service. What I've been trying to do and encourage employers to do is to have their management trained to identify some of the signs and signals in terms of this person needs mental health care, because many times we just deal with if the person has a problem and we address that, but there are signs to recognize this person really have some traumatic experience and they need some mental health care. We need to not wait until it escalates, but we need to be able to pick up these signs and do. Many organizations do already have that kind of expertise in the floor, or not really expertise, but in terms of any knowledge of. So what I'm trying to do now is to let's do some training so that I can identify some of the things that, you know, you can expect from this person to know that they need help. So early recognition would be able to prevent the person until they reach a stage of mental illness or deep depression. And so we have been trying to train, because they have been always dealing with the putting the plaster on the sore. And we are saying from the time we identify there's a little bruise, a little burn, a little whatever, let's address it. That has been a challenge. Yes.
Caribbean, that we have a particular stigma surrounding mental health issues. So when you address this with your clients or anybody that you speak to about this, what sort of terms do you use? I mean, are you able to use mental health, or do you couch it in some other way in order, like perhaps stress or something like that, to really get them to embrace and not stigmatize employees?
Okay. One of the things I've been trying to do is destigmatize the word mental health. We have to be able to understand that, listen, this is something that we have to deal with. Even opening my business in a mall, people felt, well, people wouldn't want to go to the mall because it's a space where people see them coming. I said, we have to stop stigmatizing mental health. It's an important aspect just as the physical health. And we have to deal with it. So I want persons to know. So what I do to counteract that is to educate. I always talk about mental health. Like when in radio, I talk about mental health, the importance, so that you will get accustomed to it and be able to use the terms feeling comfortable to use it. And that's what I try to do, because many times we stigmatize it, we feel something is wrong and we don't even want to say the word. I want us to understand it's important to use the word. It's just as important as your physical health. So let's talk mental health, and I do it all the time. Yeah.
Agreed. Thank
you. So I
you.
use it with my clients and let them know your mental health is important.
Yes, yeah. Definitely, especially in these times. So Lara, I just want to flip back to you, and it's, I guess, the same sort of discussion in terms of centering the employee in these sort of times when people are very focused on the bottom line. Companies are, very interested in how they're going to survive. But you're really advocating for a return to a people-centered approach to HR and management. And dovetailing with what Joanne was saying, what's been your experience in trying to get employers to think beyond just their immediate, financial survival, but really thinking about the employees and also their mental health or anything else like that?
Well, one of the big challenges we have here, I think maybe throughout the Caribbean, is that we're accustomed to managing people when we can see them. And I know Joanne talked about absenteeism, right? One of the big things, I've worked here for 25 years, is being on time for work, right? I mean, check you, and you get, if you're 5 minutes late, you get buff, and everybody's logged, and timekeeping is a huge thing. You could be the most fantastic performer employee ever, but you're late for work 3 times, you get a letter. And I think working from home now, I have clients who have said to me, they ask their staff every morning at 8 a.m. they have to WhatsApp to say, I'm awake, I'm at my computer, right? And what it has really done is it's pushed employers to trust people. We do not have cultures of trust in our workplaces here. We don't trust. If I can't see you, then I think you're asleep in the lunchroom, goofing off, late, not working, right? And to be fair, part of that is on the employees as well, because in some cases, they don't always make the effort. But what COVID has made us do, because we can't see people, is we've had to trust them. And I actually think, from my own experience, that has been huge for me to let go that, oh my God, it's 8:01, where is everybody? And say, okay, it's fine, because I see my staff. They may not be online, because I see them, I see their work. They may not be online, in the morning, but then in the evening, I get some emails, some reports. The work hasn't suffered. Clients are very happy with delivery. In fact, we've even excelled in some areas that we didn't before COVID. But as somebody who's run a business in Trinidad for 25 years, it's really forced me to trust my staff. And that was a difficult thing for me. It was a journey for me as well. And I've seen it. I'm now preaching it to my clients. Give them the tools. They must know exactly what's expected of them in their KPIs, their job descriptions, their performance targets, and so on. But trust them to do the work. Now, there are always people who abuse your trust, of course. There are some people who've really pushed this to the limits of ridiculousness and done barely any work for the last 12 months. But in my experience, that is absolutely the minority. And the majority of people love working from home in some form and want to prove that they can carry on doing it. So especially here where we have so many problems with traffic, and that affects your mental health, right? But then the flip side is, especially for women, especially for people who are homeschooling children, they can't wait to get back to the office and stop being teachers and therapists and chefs and all that. I mean, I really don't know how some parents, but women in particular, have done it this last year. I mean, the stress on women, and the studies have shown it, domestic violence, homeschooling, caring for parents, you know, losing their jobs, because women are significantly more women engaged in the informal sector, in tourism and retail and food and beverage jobs. All of those were wiped out. So women have borne the brunt of this COVID pandemic globally, no question. And what is being done to help women? In fact, I just today was talking to a colleague, because we're being asked to submit ideas for our national budget, which is coming up in September. We've got to have gender-focused budgets, gender-centric budgeting, and mental health is a big part of that, because women's mental health has been absolutely, I don't know what the clinical term is, but crushed. Women are, you know, absolutely stretched beyond, in some cases, beyond repair. So what are we doing as a nation, as nations in the Caribbean and Latin America, to really help rebuild our women? Because if you have women who are healthy, productive, it obviously, we know, influences children's well-being and the family's well-being and all the rest of it. So I'm certainly not an expert. I've read some of the studies that have been done. We really have to change how we trust our staff. That for me was a personal journey, and I'm thrilled with it now, because I can close my eyes and know that they're doing their work. And then I think the other side of it is to really build policies and budgets nationally within our organizations. I mean, I have been buying school supplies for one of my staff, because she's a single mum homeschooling, and very quietly, privately, we've just been supporting her. We got a tablet for him. We didn't make a big song and dance of it. She reached out to me, I offered to help, and we've been, for the last year, just giving her a little extra to help with that. You know, there are small things you can do, but then there are also bigger things that need doing on a national scale. So yeah, so that's for now for Rhonda to solve.
Okay, thank you. And so, yeah, I'd like to flip to Rhonda. Coming from the UK, Rhonda, I know that remote working is not a new phenomenon for companies in the UK. They've been doing it for quite some time, especially those that have multinational enterprises, global enterprises. But I'm interested in going back to your discussion about, you know, intangible assets and building value through employees, and kind of linking it again to the same question. How prepared are companies to give their employees, to trust their employees, using Lara's term, to be that sort of entrepreneur, to deliver value for them in this sort of environment? What has been your experience?
Well, it depends on the culture of the organization. The same in Trinidad, I guess, because remember, I'm from Trinidad originally. I was born in the Caribbean, so I know what the culture is like in the Caribbean. And yes, it is different here. There's an entrepreneurial edge, I would say, but it's not something that Trinidadians or Caribbean nationals can't develop. I've seen the tech sector in the Caribbean and it's thriving. So I would say in terms of remote working in the UK, yes, we were accustomed to this, but anyone can adapt to the environment. That's what we do. And I can see that the Caribbean, well, I see people at home. I'm guessing that you're at home now. Yes. So, yeah. Sorry, have I answered your question? It's 10 o'clock, after 10 o'clock here. So if I haven't, just.
Yes, in part, I understand you and Lara have flipped. Lara came from the UK to the Caribbean, and you went from Trinidad to the UK. And so, yeah, I was really trying to see from your experience, you know, kind of contrasting it with what you're seeing in the UK, and versus what you were hearing from the Caribbean, just to kind of where we could go based on what you've seen there and even in your own experience. That was kind of what I was getting at.
Okay, so one of the things that I noticed was, just like you said, Lara flipped from here to there. Some people actually, and I don't know if organizations in the Caribbean did this as well, but some people actually moved from, because it was cold here at the time in March. Some people moved when the announcement happened. As soon as the borders opened, they moved from here to other places. I know someone who went to Jamaica. He's still working here, but he's in Jamaica enjoying the sunshine. And I know of another, someone else who's from the Caribbean. She had an ill parent in the US. She's not in Trinidad anymore. She's in the US, but she's still working for her employer in Trinidad. So remote working is working. It's just that probably it's the trust, Lara, the trust thing, because if the employers decide that they don't want to introduce it or don't want to embrace it, as others have, they will, of course, be asking people to come back to the office.
Yeah, but let's just be clear. Sorry to interject. There are only certain types of job that can be done remotely.
Oh, okay? Of course.
Right.
Yes.
So, we're talking about a very privileged group of employees, let's put it that way, who have the technological skills, the job description and so on to be able to work anywhere in the world, right? And the employer doesn't even need to know where you are as long as you're delivering. I saw a very interesting short thing on the BBC the other day talking about this whole idea of the City of London and all the bankers and everybody's going to stay working remotely. But one of the things, and I've worked in London as well, is when you come out of the tube station and you walk to your company where you work, you stop and you buy a coffee, they buy a newspaper at the little corner shop, maybe a sandwich for lunch from the sandwich shop. So the Trinidad version of that is you pop out to get a roti for lunch, you go to the little corner shop to buy some bread or whatever for your dinner. So the moral of the story is that, yes, the big banks, Morgan Chase and FCB and whoever, might be fine with working from home, but we're killing all those little businesses that are very often run by women or run by families who rely on foot traffic, people walking to and from, getting a taxi, getting a bus, whatever it might be, going to their cars, or, after work, going to a restaurant to have, we like to lime after work, going to have a beer and a dinner or something with friends. We're killing all of that if everybody's staying at home. So I don't think remote work is the answer for everything. And I think we have to be very mindful of the impact of it, is what I'm saying. So yes, it's nice for some people and for some jobs, but many of us, a majority of us, I think, are going to really almost go back to exactly where we were before COVID.
Yes, you may come in, if I may reply, Carmel, are you okay with me replying?
Oh, sure. I was only agreeing because I'd seen that with New York, all the little delis and everything like that had gone out of business, so many bars closing because of the same thing that Lara mentioned. You don't have in a commercial city like New York or London, when it's really the workforce that are the customers, when they start pulling back and working remotely, all those other businesses are severely impacted. So I was just agreeing.
Yeah, and I agree as well. I actually work with the City of London Corporation, one of their delivery companies, management consultants. We have about 200 delivery companies here. And what I can tell you, yes, they are currently looking at a strategy to rebuild the city. And they're, of course, encouraging the banks and all of these bigger employers in the city to get their staff to come back. But I often say change is like this. If you tell someone this is what you ought to do, you're not going to get the change. Many of them have decided, and I don't know if you've seen it in newspapers, but people are deciding to leave those employers who are demanding that they come back. So I understand that there's a ripple effect. And if it's one thing that the pandemic has done, is shown how interconnected the ecosystem is. One thing goes and several things goes, you know. So what I can say is this. This is the time for retailers to become more innovative in their approaches. Amazon has existed for a long time, enough time that they could have put a shop on there if they were a retail business. For the food places, what I can tell you happened here in my little, so I live not in the center, city center, but outside of, and in my little town here, what they've done is delivered food. So they thrived during the pandemic.
We all had that, and then the government shut it down again. We all they shut it all down.
Well, I guess it's the regulators then that is, you know, but definitely here, people have come up with other ways to do business.
But don't you think you lose community? I mean, we had all of that last year. Delivery, everything you could imagine was being delivered, curbside, the whole lot. Government shut it all down because we had another spike. But the other thing is, you know, if we want to reopen city centres and businesses and so on, but what we're not doing here is looking at, because there's a massive environmental impact, right? For us, it's all about cars. Our public transport is rubbish. As I know in the UK, you know, they say the sign of a developed country is when rich people take the bus, because it's so much more efficient than driving, right? Like London. I mean, you know, owning a car makes no sense in London. Trinidad is all about cars. So we had a perfect opportunity to create a green Port of Spain, bicycles or a tram or something, so that when it reopened, it wasn't cars and traffic again. We've missed that entirely, haven't done it, not going to happen. No, so we've not thought differently. So to your point, yes, we could have changed, we could have reopened, but in a different way, with respect to the environment and to reduce traffic. We haven't done any of that. It's going to be same old, same old. I'm sorry to say.
I just want to go back a little on Lara's, if I may, on Lara's point about, you know, we're looking at the impact of the shutdown and so, and one of the things we keep forgetting is how it affects persons, the individual. So you were talking about the person who has business, yes, his business going bad because of maybe shut down because of that. But the individuals themselves who have to stay home, the psychological impact is great, and it calls for us to be very innovative, strategic. I have been working with some children at school who, because they're no longer going in classroom, we have to find things for parents to do to make them feel part of the class. It's not just sitting down there and working in the classroom, but after that, I tell the parents, listen, organize where the children play in this room. It's yes, they're at their own homes, but we have to be strategic, find different things, be very innovative, and find ways where the children feel connected. Same with big persons, adults. I tell persons who are very depressed during the period of time, listen, do a games night. We do games night at home and we have people, but during the COVID, do your games night and do a movie night. Have everybody at their own home. We have to be innovative, and that's the only way we can deal with it, because a lot of persons are going depressed because of this loneliness. We have to address it. We have to be able to find ways of dealing with it, coping. So we must come up with different strategies to cope with it. Yeah, so that's my take on it.
I agree with you, and I play virtual mahjong every weekend with my sister in Chicago and my friend in England. So we've got it down. But there's also the problem with too much screen time for all of us adults. You know, you go from your Zoom to your Netflix, back to your Zoom. So I think that, and again, we've been prohibited from going outside, exercising in public, and going to the beach. The beaches are closed. All of those things affect, as you say, mental well-being. So I could be totally fine being on my own, you know, if I can get to the beach once a week, or go for a walk on the savannah, or go and buy doubles. I can't do any of those things now. So there's a lot more. The restrictions, I think, have been very difficult. And I hear you, and I definitely have been doing all of those connecting with people, but sometimes you actually need to see human beings, to smell them, touch them, hug them, you know, and virtual connectivity is good for a while, but it doesn't replace the real thing. And that's what I hope we rebuild. I really do hope. And I last thought on this is, a friend of mine has a son who's 13, and prior to COVID was super social, football and cricket and all the great things, and very popular. And in the beginning of COVID, he really struggled, couldn't deal with not seeing his friends. And now, a year and a change later, he doesn't want to speak to anybody. He's in his room, he's gaming, he's totally antisocial. And they now have him, you know, speaking with a therapist because he's changed completely. He's an entirely different human being. So the effects are very real.
Wow. I just wanted to point out to participants that you can definitely join the discussion. The chat is open if anybody has any questions. Kamala, I don't know if you had anything that you wanted to raise at this time.
No, I find that there's been such a fascinating conversation so far, you know, and I agree with Lara in terms of the really the amount of opportunities that are here for us. It's like, you know, everything is all renewed and we can do things entirely differently. But it's such a difficult time for us because you can't predict what's going to happen, and therefore what impacts that is, okay, so one thing, we don't know when the restrictions would be over, which is something we can control, but it's really dependent on us gaining control over the numbers of persons who are being affected. So the level of uncertainty is so great that it takes a certain kind of personality to say, okay, in the midst of that, I'm going to jump in with both feet. I'm going to do things entirely differently. And I am sure I'm going to succeed. That takes a lot of emotional support. And I am glad we are having this conversation because, you know, that's something organizations need to do as well. If you truly want to restructure and re-strategize, it requires having a level of trust where you need to engage with your employees so closely that everyone is going to say, we are not quite sure how this is going to work out, but we are willing to give it a try because we are seeing an opportunity in the midst of this.
You know, Kamala, you're right. And something that's been studied a lot in the last few months is employers have to communicate, even if they have nothing to communicate. Even if I'm saying to you, I don't know what's going to happen, because in Trinidad, it's literally almost week to week, right? We don't know what's going to be lifted, when are the borders opening and restrictions and so on. But what we've been doing is almost weekly, I meet with the managers and say, right, this is where we are, especially to overcome fake news, rumor, WhatsApp, all the madness that happens here. But communicating constantly. We know you're unsure. We're unsure too. That vulnerability that was discussed earlier as an employer. I don't think weakness. It's not that I don't have control of what's going on, but I'm sharing with you that as soon as I know something, you'll know something, and I'm keeping you in the loop. People have to feel reassured, especially if they don't know, if they're in a business or a company that may be, you know, on hard times. And that, for a lot of people, they haven't been able to get that reassurance. So if you're in a position to do that as an employer, I think that's so important.
Mm-hmm. And there was something else I was thinking about. Sorry, Carmel.
But no, I was only going to message in the chat window. So I just wanted to point out that Margaret Ann just to note that she thinks that working remotely can be done on a part-time basis as well if the circumstances be agreed on by management and staff post-COVID. So I just want to throw that in there.
So, but I actually want to take it beyond that part-time basis and say what Rhonda described in terms of you can be located in Jamaica or Barbados, Carmel, as we have discussed with your Barbados passport, where people can move to somewhere that they feel comfortable and they can enjoy and relax and work in an entirely different country because the connectivity allows us to do that. But there's one more thing. I can't believe Professor Garrett is up at this hour, Rhonda. He's just entering the room. Let me just make sure to admit him. But Yeah, it reminded me, if you guys know of the example, this book that was written called Maverick. It's about this company in Brazil called Semco, where what they did was empower employees totally with, so Lara is talking about communicate and share information. They just turned that whole thing on its head. All financial information available to staff, you know, information that allows you to make decisions in the boardroom, you know, as well. And so the level of trust that they were able to build with their staff to turn around the way in which the organization worked, and which has worked for more than 25 years. So it wasn't just a one-time thing that, you know, there was a season that allowed it. There's so many great lessons for us that existed, that the pandemic opened opportunities for us to then say, how can we build that level of trust that we don't need to see our employees? We give them all the information they need, and we trust them to perform to the targets and so that we want, and the outcomes that we want. Dr. Spence, I want to ask you that question. You know, what does it prevent us from having that kind of level behavior and comfort that we can build that kind of trust so that we could move into taking advantage of these kinds of opportunities?
I think for us in the Caribbean, we're looking to see some results before we actually do something like that. To trust someone in terms of have them working at home and you're not checking in on them. We want to see that this has worked. You want to see results, and then people start to build trust. And that's how we are in the Caribbean like that. We look to see, okay, how it's working, and then, okay, I'll take a little bit at a time until eventually I feel comfortable to do it. Yeah.
I think also, though, we need to be clear that there are millions of people in this region for whom remote work is not an option, right? So, you know, yes, it's lovely. I can be on the beach in Jamaica doing my spreadsheets and my whatnot, but a significant majority of the population in the Caribbean do not have that option because of the nature of the work that they do. So what has changed for them out of COVID? Okay, many of them have lost their jobs. Are they then, after COVID, not going to have jobs to go back to because the businesses have just gone? Are the businesses going to be reopened but in a new online model, which now has no place for me because I don't have that skill? Are we retooling and retraining unemployed people to be able to access jobs in the post-COVID economy? I don't think we've had that discussion, certainly not in Trinidad. So yes, the hybrid, the technological people, we're all good. We're good. I could run Regency in my bathroom for the next 20 years. I'm good. But I am not the majority of people in this country. And we're not addressing that issue. There's so many, I mean, we've seen them, Carmel. I, for the first time in my life living here, have seen women with cardboard signs begging for food outside Massey to feed their children. I've never seen that. We've always had a few beggars, but women with signs saying, I have 7 children, 4 children, no job. What are we doing for them? What are governments in the region? The World Bank issued a study this week that talked about people going from middle class to poverty in the region. Something like 12 million families have literally become poverty stricken according to the UN guidelines because of COVID. They can't work remotely. So what's being done for them? Our schools, when school reopens in September, is back to blackboard and chalk, Kamla. We're not putting technology in our classrooms. We're not enabling our children to be digital citizens. They're going back to the same old model that they had there from colonial Britain. That's my point, is we're not using this as an opportunity to really change.
Yeah, I was going to actually reference the school system, because not only the children, but you also have the teachers who were in large part not equipped for this digital transformation. So you have teachers who have not been comfortable, and while they have been trying the best they can in this sort of remote environment, you can tell that, you know, they were not equipped for it. So it's difficult to then upskill the children to be part of this new workforce when the people responsible do not really embrace those skills themselves.
Yes, and that is exactly what is going through my mind now, Carmel. That is, in fact, a lot of us are just waiting out the pandemic and thinking life will go back to the way it was before. And so we are losing out on a great opportunity to have the conversation to find out, okay, how can we do things differently that would be a lot more embracing? So when Lara talks about the impact on people, it ought not to be that huge number, because even if it means doing things differently, like for instance, those people who have small businesses, they're taking orders via WhatsApp. They're communicating. So persons have found means of using the technology to adapt, to help them to survive in this environment. So there are opportunities, but is it that we are not embracing it sufficiently because our mindset is, well, as soon as the pandemic is over,
things will go back to normal.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, sorry, Rhonda, go ahead.
I was going to say, if we're waiting for the pandemic to be over in the Caribbean, and we're hoping that someone else will tell us what to do or how to get out of this, that is the wrong attitude. You have to get involved. I know earlier at the 4 o'clock session, Ronald was talking about the ESG initiatives. And if employers who do have work and still have an operational business, if they are not opening access to other people and creating jobs, they are part of the problem. I say that because in the economy that we live in today, you do not have to all do physical work that creates physical assets. You can be creating the intangibles. And I say this all the time, but I don't think people get it. So marketing for Trinidad and Tobago, I can tell you, living here, I'm amazed that we do not have the products that Trinidad and Tobago produces on our shelves. Marketing Trinidad and Tobago products is a job for all citizens, not just the Angostura employees. We have the assets, the infrastructure available, and we don't have to own it. Social media is there for other people to get involved. I'm saying the model, the business model, the operating model has to change from that I have to employ only this person after they have gone through some kind of recruitment process. We have to change that in order for this to work for us in the Caribbean. It's very important. If you don't, and remember, influencers around the world, they're not being paid for their time. They're being paid for their outcome. So when they get people listening, and I admire people who go on TikTok and do the videos about Caribbean cuisine, and I look at it and I say, yes, the young folks have it, they understand. They're earning from that because there's power in that little thing of promoting your country. You don't have to get permission from the business to do so. It would
Rhonda,
be nice.
You obviously did not see what happened to Juve Rum.
I did.
We don't like that at all. We do not like that at all. Some random person doing a Trini thing, you mad?
No. I'm not saying a random person. Remember,
the whole country went nuts.
Yes, but that was someone who wasn't a Trini or.
I think we could have embraced that. That could have been an amazing opportunity for Trinidad. He could have come down with all his friends, play Carnival, play Juve. We could have made a fortune. Black Panther, have Juve Rum in the next movie. I mean, come on.
The person who made that, who made the decision for Trinidad and Tobago was Nicki Minaj, really, because she had the power to reply. And she so, but I'm saying the model has to change. Because we have fantastic products across the Caribbean. I remember seeing, I'm seeing a comment there. I remember seeing one of the Caribbean, I think it's from Jamaica. Is it citrus punch or something? it has a yellow sun on the label. Anyway, I remember seeing it in the grocery and thinking, oh, wow, I've never seen a Caribbean thing here before. It's great. Because usually if you want to get something, you buy it on Amazon. But it's because our population here don't know about those things. Imagine if they heard about it because I or someone else who lives here promotes it, not because they asked me to, but because I want to. I'm promoting a country. So that's what the open access employment is all about. And I think that that will help Caribbean nationals support the population. You have to get the private sector to get involved in this. It can't just be small businesses trying to do the thing on their own. The big ones have to get involved.
Well, I think, Rhonda, again, coming, in the UK, I think one of the things I'm hearing, it's kind of gigging, and, the gig economy is very big in the UK. So you have people who can easily pivot and do those sort of things. Whereas in the Caribbean, people aren't really accustomed to the sort of short-term, adapting and moving here or there, trying to sell new products, trying to do new things. It's very much about job security. The longer you have in the multi-decades that you can say you've been in a job, the better. So I think it really calls for an entirely different mindset and a model for us to follow in the Caribbean, but somebody needs to lead the way. That you were seeing again from Margaret Ann, she said we need to focus on giving staff deliverables and outcomes for those who can work from home. A revised training model for our staff for this change is required, and she agrees with Lara that there are some jobs that have to be done on work sites. And really and truly, because in the Caribbean, quite a number of us are very tourism dependent, that really is a job that has to be done on work site, So where are we going to flip? And for us in Barbados, I think it's about when this whole thing started, we had about 40,000 people from our tourism sector who then went on severance, etc. Right? So, are either direct or indirectly in tourism. So that's a lot of people to then try to retool and find an alternative for where they can use some sort of remote services. So I think it's going to require a lot more rather than just people being prepared to embrace it. There definitely have to be systems in place and also models to follow. That sort of training is going to be necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. But those models have to come from the organizations, from the businesses. They can't come from, government or some savior somewhere.
I think it has to be a partnership, to be honest, because we have to change we've had to change our education system for years. COVID should have been that catalyst to transform education in the Caribbean with investment, IDB, World Bank, IMF, whomever, to then train young people in the jobs of the future, tourism included, marketing, online, gig, all of that. We have missed that window. Certainly here, I can't speak for the rest of the Caribbean. So, there's always going to be a requirement. If you have a hotel, you're going to need a receptionist, you're going to need a cook, you're going to need a waitress. So there's always going to be a need for those sorts of skills and those sorts of jobs. But it doesn't mean that we couldn't have brought back our young people into a transformed education system to create workers of the future. The private sector in Trinidad was very willing to be part of that solution. Technology, we've got the tools, we've got the know-how, the training, in many cases for free, but it requires legislative change. It requires negotiation with the trade unions. It's a lot more than just a company saying this is what we want to do. It's a national system that needed changing. And quite frankly and quite sadly, we have not seen that willingness to be part of that solution here. The private sector's been banging.
Lara, I think there is change is going to come. It may be slow, I am part of a committee, the government form in terms of the Concord, that and the SCA in terms of reform. And we are looking at the whole system in terms of changing. Because of COVID, we have been just dormant right now, but the purpose for us getting together is really looking at the whole change. We would look at those things in terms of how do we move forward and how do we embrace technology in helping our children to move forward. So those are things that we are looking at. It's just slow right now in terms of, because of COVID, we have not been meeting to do anything, but that's part of our.
But you see, that's the irony. Now is the time you should have been meeting every week virtually.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I'm on the board of the NTA, and we have kept meeting every month. We met the minister, and because I said,
I totally agree with you.
We can't sit back and go, well, after the pandemic, we'll find solutions.
Yes, I totally agree because I am of that opinion.
Yeah. So now is the time to come up with a proposal. You've got, I don't know, 600,000. What is the number of children in school here? Right, we need to reach out. IDB, we need 1 million laptops. Go, right? We need to train 100,000 teachers by September. Go. Now is that we missed that window. Is what I'm saying. Even the NTA, we have, TVET training is something that has always been given very scant regard in Trinidad. It's considered something you do if you can't do anything else. And we are really trying to. I've only been on the board since January, but trying to get TVET training as part of the national curriculum. So if you're not good at maths, geography, science, no problem. Straight into TVET or art or web design or fashion or whatever from small. But that is a massive change, massive change. But we could have started that conversation as COVID hit. All right, guys, pivot, time to pivot in education. But we didn't. We said because of COVID, we can't meet. Many groups. COVID, we can't meet. We have to wait. So, it's to be another 30 years. You and I will meet up, old ladies, going, well, how's it going? And nothing will have changed.
Yes, unfortunately, I think that we in the beginning treated COVID like a natural disaster, where if we just waited, eventually, give it a week, give it 2 weeks, something like that, and then we could just go back to normal. But unfortunately, that has not been the way. Captain, I see you're signaling me. It's 6:32, which means we are now 2 minutes over.
The panelists to share their closing thoughts.
Yes, definitely. So as I've just noted, 6:32, we're 2 minutes over our closing. So if you could just share your quick 30-second final thoughts. Rhonda, I'll go back to you for this.
My final thoughts. Yes. I do think that as much as you're saying that many people haven't done anything yet, it's not too late to begin. Joanne, I'm looking at you because in terms of those meetings, we hadn't stopped any meetings for our delivery company. We've been meeting every week. It's been a year. We've been doing different things to help businesses recover. And that's important, but it's not too late. Starting as soon as possible, next week, this week, schedule them, because we're not even at the middle yet of this. We're not even there yet. And if you take that into consideration, I know on an earlier conversation, they were talking about business continuity plan. If you are thinking about business continuity, and we do not know how long this is going to be, we do not know if more of our employees will be impacted, you need to change your model. Because if they are, your business is at high risk of going under. That's my closing point.
Thanks, Rhonda, and definitely agreed. I mean, the title of the session had in the words post-COVID, but we know post-COVID is at least another 3 to 4 years out. So Lara, what are your closing 30-second thoughts?
So my final thoughts are, trust your people. They won't always get it right, and some of them will abuse that trust, but by and large, people want to do a good job. They want to be respected. They want to keep their jobs if they can and to add value. So look at the way you manage your people, you measure performance, and think, as was said, about new models, creating a workforce that is brings back the human, brings back the people. And my last thought is to stop just complaining about what the government's not doing or what they should be doing, and actually to step up and be part of the solution. You know, we are a country that loves to complain and criticize on Facebook, and we are armchair advocates. And I would encourage anybody on this call to get involved, join a group, get on a board, you know, be part of that change that you want to see in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you too, Lara. And now, Joanne, your final thoughts?
I would want to first, let me just address Rhonda. I'm on other boards and we have continued our meetings as usual. I think because this one is a new one, that's why they haven't started, you know, but I do believe, according to Lara, this particular committee dealing with the children and the future of the children, I think this is very important. I'm anxious for it to start. But my words that I want to leave you all with is that the three things that I said, very, very important as we move forward, post-COVID: vulnerability, connectivity, and flexibility. And all the speakers connected to it in some way. And, you know, I found it was so ironic that all of us spoke it in some way. So I want to just leave you all with that. You know, be vulnerable, connect with your people, build that connection, and be flexible. Yes? So God bless you, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you too, Joanne. And Kamala, back to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Carmel. So I want to express my sincere thanks to Lara, Quentrall, Thomas, Dr. Joanne, Spence, and Rhonda Best for giving of their time and preparing for this panel today. And of course, to you, Carmel Haynes, for some wonderful moderation. I found that this panel was really, really stimulating in a very real way. You know, what are the things that we need to do and can do? We began with Dr. Spencer talking about the fact that, you know, people can be impacted negatively because of their mental health. People can go into depression and all of that. But if you look at the enthusiasm with which Lara speaks, you can see that there are lots of people with the energy to take things forward. And as Rhonda has really very clearly stated just now, it's not too late. The reality is we've had a year, we have lessons we have learned, and therefore we now can use that to help us make the next move. We ought not to be immobilized anymore. So thank you guys so very, very much. We all need to be part of the solution, and I am happy that that is exactly where we are at with this. You know, we are trying to ensure that we all contribute to that better future that we all have. So my thanks to all of you, all of the participants who joined us and stayed the course with us all day. I'm seeing Professor Garrett is in the room with us as yet. Thank you so much, Professor. I know it's very late where you are at now, but it means a lot to us that you would have come in at this minute to join us and be part of the final panel and hear the discussions. So everyone else, thank you all very much. Enjoy your evening. Tomorrow we want an entirely different sector, and that is the public sector. Galaxy J2 Prime. I've been texting you all evening. We need to know who are the people in the room. So if you don't know that you are Galaxy 12 Prime, you would have seen it just now. Please make sure we know who you are if you're joining us tomorrow. We have an absolutely great lineup. We start with Dr. Terence Farrell, who is going to share some of the findings they've had in looking at how boards function in the state sector. And then that's going to be followed by a panel with former Attorney General John Jeremy and former Permanent Secretary Aline McCormick. And they're going to look at the duties of directors in the state sector, and in particular, John Jeremy, who is a senior counsel and who lectures in company law, is going to really take apart that whole area of Section 99 of the Companies Act and how that is impacting directors' duties as we are seeing the courts treating with it in today's world. So lots of things that we really want to be connected to and learn from. Thank you all very much, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you too, Kamala. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Stay
Bye,
safe.
bye.
Yes, stay safe.